Hindsight is 2020. It's easy to look back on your previous decisions and see where you went wrong and where you should have acted differently. But looking back on it, I believe that I made the best decisions given the information and emotional state that I had access to when I made those decisions. Bearing that in mind, I don't have any regrets about anything that I've done in my 20s. That said, I do see certain opportunities that I maybe missed out on, or certain moves that I shouldn't have made, that had I acted differently than the way that I did, would have made my life a hell of a lot easier at the age of 24. But obviously, I can't go back and change those decisions that I made. So the next best thing that I can do is live vicariously through you by letting you know what those decisions were so that you don't make the same mistakes that I've made and you can have a much smoother ride to where you want to go in life. Which I'm assuming, if you watch my channel, is at least somewhat similar to where I am in life. That said, if I could restart my 20s, the first thing that I would change is that I would have completely focused on building a personal brand rather than building a business out of YouTube. What does that mean? Well, if you haven't been following my channel for the past 4 or 5 years, here's the cycle that I've undergone pretty much throughout that entire time. There would be a brief period of enjoyment where I was creating the content that I wanted to create, and I was providing value to people. And I may not have been getting quite as many views, but I still enjoyed my day-to-day life. I enjoyed the process. I had everything dialed in, and I was just living life and documenting it in a valuable way. Invariably, throughout that process, there was always 1 or 2 videos that would become outliers. They would blow up, they would get a lot of views, they would get a lot of traction. My business mind would then turn on, it would take over, and it would tell me that I needed to capitalize on that momentum by making more of those videos. Now here's the thing about me. I don't like doing the same type of content over and over and over again, at least not for extended periods of time. I have to change up the topics, I have to change up the overall concepts of my content as time moves on. Otherwise, it gets stale and it begins to feel like a 9 to 5, which is literally what I dropped out of college to avoid doing. Nevertheless, my business mind or my ego would take over and I would double down on that type of content. My channel would then rapidly ascend. That's where I would get 10,000 subscribers in a month, and I would make more money, get more views, and everything on the surface would be much better. But behind the scenes, I would be miserable because I was no longer creating content in a way that reflected all of who I am. I was compartmentalizing myself in order to build the business because it was the smart move to make. And although this approach got me to 100K plus subscribers, what inevitably happened every single time I pursued that path was I would basically burn out and then crash out. And then what would happen is I would make a video saying that I quit YouTube, which by the way, every time I've made a video saying I quit YouTube, I meant it at that time. So I would make a video saying I quit YouTube or I'm taking a break from YouTube, whatever. And then I would take a break from YouTube. But during my break, I would always start making videos again, but they would be the videos that I wanted to make. And those videos wouldn't get views. They wouldn't get any views at all. I mean, they would get some views. And if you're a real true supporter, then you probably watch those videos as well. But they would get far fewer views. My income would drop substantially and all of the momentum would be gone. And from there, I would get discouraged and slow down the content even more until I reached a standstill. And then I would have to find that creative urge again to start creating content in an enjoyable way. And then the process would repeat itself over and over and over again. If I could go back, I would stick to building a personal brand. Instead of thinking about what would make me the most money, what would get me to 100K subscribers, what would allow me to grow my channel the fastest, I would instead focus on creating content that reflected where I was at that point in my life. And again, there were always these brief windows of time, maybe 1 or 2 months at a time, where I would do that and life would be great. Wouldn't make as much money, wouldn't get as many views, but I was happy. I enjoyed life. And now I'm back in a space where that's the case. And I want to keep it that way this time. I want to post that variety of content that reflects all of who I am, artistically, from an entrepreneurial perspective, etc. Intrusive thoughts, everything. I just want to create content that reflects me authentically and by extension provides value to you. But if I could go back, I would have stuck with that process the whole entire time and instead focused on building a coaching brand on the side where I could focus on making that my business. So instead of making YouTube in and of itself the business, I would have used YouTube to funnel people into my business by creating content that I enjoy and building a business that I also enjoy running and not relying on YouTube to be that thing. Because something I've realized over time is that YouTube is not a long-term play. It's probably longer term than Instagram or TikTok, but it is not something that you should plan to do for the next 20 years if you're an aspiring YouTuber. If you're an aspiring YouTuber, start thinking about how you can channel your audience into something else. How you can use YouTube as a stepping stone to pursue a more sustainable business model. Because this business model is not sustainable by its very nature. Unless you plan on hitting 10 million plus subscribers, don't think that you're just going to make a full-time living on YouTube for the next 20 or 30 years until you retire. So that's the first thing that I would change. Now, the second thing that I would change if I could go back and restart my 20s was I would not have moved to that apartment that I moved to. So if you're unaware of what I'm talking about, in 2021, July of 2021, I signed a lease for this apartment in this really, really nice part of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I was really excited about it at the time. I was making good money for the first time in my life. I think I was making around $4,000 a month, $5,000 a month, sometimes $6,000. And things were great. I mean, I would take a break from YouTube and I would still make $3,000 that month just from making sponsored posts. So I had everything dialed in money-wise, and I was really excited to move into that apartment in November of 2021 because that was my move-in date. If I could go back, I would have canceled that lease. Why would I have canceled that lease? The reason why I would have canceled that lease, and let me go ahead and look at my notes so I don't get this number wrong, but the reason why I would have canceled that lease is because had I canceled it, I would have saved $15,000 on rent. And I would have saved another $5,000 on food. In other words, moving to that apartment cost me $20,000. I made a lot of videos in the past talking about how getting that brand new BMW, which by the way, I also wouldn't have gotten if I could go back, but I made a lot of videos explaining how me getting that BMW was kind of the pivotal moment in terms of my financial downfall. That wasn't it. Getting that BMW hurt, but that's not what made me go broke. What made me go broke was moving out into this apartment that ultimately cost me $20,000. If I could go back, I would not have done that. Instead, I would have either stayed with my parents or better yet, pursued other alternatives, which I'll probably make a whole separate video about what I would have done in that situation, knowing what I know now, because that's literally a whole separate thing that I think you would benefit from. I know you would benefit from, especially if you're in a similar situation. So if you're in a situation like that right now, where you're making good money for the first time, and you're making that money online in particular, don't move out of your parents' house yet. Just stay put and wait for me to drop this video so that I can help guide you in a much more prosperous and enjoyable direction. Now, another reason why I wouldn't have moved into that apartment is because had I not gotten that apartment, I wouldn't have felt justified in getting that BMW, which is basically the next thing that if I could go back and restart my 20s, I wouldn't have done. That was one of the most ignorant decisions I've ever made in my life. In fact, that probably was the most ignorant decision I ever made in my life. At least with the apartment, I was partially able to justify it in my head as a move to advance my career. Because I figured if I have my own space, I can film whenever I want, and I can dedicate a whole entire room to being a filming studio, this and that and the third. Ended up making the same amount of money living in the apartment as I did in the bedroom in my parents' house, but that's besides the point. Okay, I got that BMW and there was literally no justification behind it. Maybe at the time I thought that it would help improve my branding and make me a more credible source of information, but I only showed the car a total of 3 or 4 times on my channel. So even if that had been the case, I didn't do a very good job of translating that into actual business growth, into an asset. And again, had I been thinking in terms of a personal brand, being authentic to myself, that justification wouldn't have worked either. So I probably wouldn't have gotten the car to begin with because I would have had no justification to get it. But listen, if you're young and you're making some good money, don't go and get a nice car in your early 20s. Get a good car, but don't get a nice car. Why do I say that? I say that because cars aren't going anywhere. They are not going anywhere. That BMW is still out there somewhere. In fact, they've come out with better BMWs now. The longer you wait, the better of a car you'll be able to get for the same money or for slightly more money. Or you'll be able to get the car that you currently want at a much lower price because newer, better cars have come out. And if you just want the newest, best car just for the sake of having the newest, best car, you need to reevaluate why you actually want that car. Because if that's the case, you're probably buying it as a status symbol, and that is definitely not a good reason to go out and spend tens of thousands of dollars on something, especially on a piece of machinery that won't make you any money. Don't go and get a really nice car in your early 20s until you are completely financially set to do so, meaning that you can purchase that car 2 times over in cash. I leased that BMW. I was not able to afford that BMW when I got it. I was able to afford the payments, $719 a month, and the insurance, I think that was, $209 a month, something like that. But the car itself, had I purchased it cash, would have been $50,000. I couldn't afford that once, much less twice. Therefore, I shouldn't have gotten it. Don't fall into that same trap, trying to impress other people. Because guess what? Other people don't care. Other people do not care what kind of car you drive. And if they do, they're probably not the kind of people that you want around you anyways. So don't go and get a nice car. Don't go and get a nice apartment. Stay with your parents, or again, wait for me to drop this other video so I can put you on game about being a digital nomad. And keep driving that Toyota Corolla. Keep driving that Honda Civic. If you live in an area where it's possible, keep taking the bus, the train, and stack your bread. Just trust me, please trust me, stack your bread. Stack your bread. If you have to pay your parents $200-$300 for rent, pay the $200-$300. I promise you, you're still coming away much further ahead than you will be from spending literally $1,500 to $2,000 every single month living on your own. Now, the last thing that I would do if I could go back and restart my 20s, it took me a very long time to realize this one, by the way. The last thing that I would do if I could restart my 20s is I would invest in myself. So throughout my 20s, I did a great job of investing in my career. I invested in equipment. I invested in software. I spent probably between $5,000 and $10,000 on equipment and software for my YouTube channel. But I didn't spend nearly enough money on myself in terms of developing the skill set to maximize the equipment and software that I had. In fact, had I spent money on myself to learn more about some of this equipment, I probably could have saved a lot of money on some of this equipment. because I was unaware of the capabilities of the equipment that I had, because I didn't have the information, because I didn't invest in myself. I was one of those people who always relied on YouTube and free game for advice. And while YouTube is a good, viable source of information, don't get me wrong, that's why I make these videos, is to contribute to that. You need to understand that it's not so much the things that you're curious about that you don't know that are holding you back in life. It's the blind spots that are holding you back in life. It's the unknown unknowns. It's the things that you're not even aware of the fact that you don't know, so you don't even know to go searching for. That's the information that's holding you back in life. And for me, there was a lot of information, a slew of pieces of knowledge that I was missing because I literally didn't even know that they existed. I didn't know what copywriting was, for example, until I was probably 22 years old. Literally did not know what it was. And because I didn't know of its existence, I didn't know to go seeking out more information about it. The reason why investing in courses and coaching and masterminds is so powerful is because you get exposed to your blind spots. You are putting yourself around people who know significantly more than you do, people who are experts at what they talk about, because they are willing to charge for their teachings. If somebody is only ever giving out free game, that means that they know in their heart that their information is not worth selling. If somebody is willing to put a price tag on their information, that means by default, well, at least more often than not, assuming that the person is reputable, that means that that person knows that their information is extremely, extremely valuable. Go and invest in a course, invest in a coaching program. You can invest in mine. I have a link in the description to that if you want to transform your life, but it doesn't even have to be mine. You can invest in someone else's if you'd prefer to do that. But do yourself a favor and take some of your money in your account right now and invest it back into yourself. Go buy courses, go buy coaching programs, go join masterminds. Just invest in yourself so that you can be exposed to these blind spots via the curriculums of these coaching programs, these courses, these masterminds, etc.